I live in a small, quiet apartment that has always been my sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the corporate world couldn't touch me. For the past 6 years, I've poured my heart and soul into my role as a project manager at a fast-growing tech firm. It was more than a job, it was the career I was building, one successful project at a time. But in a single, cold, and calculated moment, the professional life I had so carefully constructed was shattered by the very man who was supposed to be my mentor. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The email arrived at 4:52 p.m. on a Tuesday. The subject line was chillingly vague, urgent meeting. It was from Mark Foster, the head of department. My heart did a little nervous flip. Mark wasn't known for urgent meetings unless something was seriously wrong. I glanced across the open plan office and saw his door was closed, which was another bad sign. He was a firm believer in the open door policy, mostly so he could keep an eye on everyone. I knocked on his glass door, and he gestured for me to come in without looking up from his computer. Jessica Chen, the HR manager, was sitting in the chair opposite his desk, a professionally somber look on her face. That's when I knew. This wasn't about a project. This was about me. Sanai, have a seat, Mark said, finally making eye contact. His tone was devoid of the usual fake warmth he used in team meetings. He was 46, with perfectly styled silver hair and a wardrobe of expensive suits that he wore like armor. He prided himself on being a ruthless, results-driven leader. Thanks for coming in, Jessica began, folding her hands on the polished table. We've called you here today to discuss your position at the company. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Okay? Mark leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. Look, Sanai, this is difficult. The company is moving in a new direction. We're restructuring to optimize performance, and unfortunately, your role has been made redundant. Redundant. The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It felt like a punch to the gut. Redundant? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. But my team just delivered the Atlas project 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Our metrics are the highest in the department. Yes, and we appreciate your contributions, Mark said dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. But this isn't about performance. It's about a strategic realignment. Your skill set, while valuable, no longer aligns with our long-term vision. It was corporate jargon, meaningless words designed to soften a brutal blow. I looked at Jessica, hoping for some hint of humanity, but her expression was a carefully constructed mask of professional sympathy. She slid a thick folder across the desk. This is your severance package, Sanai, she said softly. It includes 3 months' pay, your remaining vacation days, and information about your benefits. We'll also need you to sign an NDA. My mind was reeling. 6 years of my life, gone in a 10-minute meeting. I had sacrificed evenings, weekends, and personal relationships for this job. I had mentored junior staff, led my team through crises, and consistently exceeded every target set for me. And for what? To be told my skill set was no longer a fit? I don't understand, I said, the shock giving way to a rising tide of anger. Mark, you and I planned the next 2 quarters of projects just last week. You approved my budget proposals yesterday morning. How can my role be redundant? Mark's jaw tightened. He hated being questioned. The decision has been made, Sanai. It's final. We need your security pass and company laptop before you leave the building today. He wanted me gone. Immediately. He didn't want me talking to my team, packing my desk, or saying goodbye. He wanted to erase me. The humiliation was a physical pain, a hot flush that spread across my chest. I thought about the team I had built, the people who trusted and relied on me. I thought about Ben Carter, my senior developer, who had become a good friend. How would they hear about this? A sterile email from HR? I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I refused to let them see me cry. I looked Mark directly in the eye. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He just stared back, his expression cold and unreadable. "Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings." As I walked out of his office, with a security guard trailing me like a shadow, the eyes of my colleagues followed me. I could feel their pity, their confusion, their fear that they might be next. I packed my things into a small cardboard box, a framed photo, a couple of books, my favorite coffee mug. It was a pathetic collection to represent 6 years of my life. Ben rushed over, his face etched with concern. "Sanai? What's going on?" "I've been let go," I managed to say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "My role is redundant." He looked stunned, then furious. "Redundant? That's insane. You're the best PM we have. It makes no sense." The security guard cleared his throat, a pointed reminder that my time was up. I gave Ben a quick, desperate hug. "I'm sorry," I whispered. As I was escorted out of the building, the glass doors sliding shut behind me, I felt a profound sense of injustice. This wasn't a restructuring. It was an execution. And I had a sickening feeling that Mark Foster had just personally signed my professional death warrant. But as I stood on the cold pavement, clutching my box of belongings, a tiny, defiant spark ignited within me. He had fired me unfairly, but this wasn't going to be the end of my story. The first few days were a blur of shock and grief. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I replayed that final meeting in my head 1,000 times, dissecting every word, every look. Mark's cold, dismissive tone, Jessica's practiced, empty sympathy. It all felt so orchestrated, so personal. The word redundant echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of how easily I had been discarded. My professional identity was so tied to that company that I felt completely lost without it. I updated my resume and LinkedIn profile, the words "open to work" feeling like a brand of failure. Every job alert that pinged on my phone was a fresh wave of anxiety. A week after I was fired, Ben called. He sounded tense, his voice low as if he was afraid of being overheard. "Hey," he said. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better," I admitted, trying to sound more resilient than I felt. "How are things at the office?" He hesitated for a moment. "Weird. Really weird. Sanai, nobody believes the redundancy story. We all know how valuable you were. Morale has hit rock bottom. Everyone's walking on eggshells. What's Mark telling everyone?" "That's the thing," Ben said, his voice dropping further. "He held a team meeting the day after you left. He said that while you were a hard worker, you lacked the innovative vision needed for the company's future. He made it sound like you were holding the team back. The injustice of it stung." "He said what? After the success of the Atlas project?" "That project was my vision." "I know," Ben said, his voice laced with anger. "We all know. He's taking credit for it now, by the way. He presented our post-launch analysis to the executives yesterday and passed off all your work as his own strategic oversight." I felt a surge of white-hot fury. It wasn't enough for him to fire me, he had to destroy my reputation and steal my achievements on his way out. "There's more," Ben continued, his voice heavy. "He promoted someone to fill your role. Not officially, of course. It's an acting position for now." I held my breath. "Who?" "You're not going to believe this. It's Liam." "Liam." Of course, it was Liam. Liam was a junior project manager on another team, barely 2 years out of college. He was charming, ambitious, and notoriously bad at his job, but he had one key skill: he was an expert at managing up. He spent more time complimenting Mark's leadership in meetings than he did managing his own projects. He was Mark's golden boy, a yes man who would never question his authority. "Liam?" I said, incredulous. He can't handle a project of that scale. He doesn't have the experience. The team will walk all over him. They're trying to, Ben said grimly. But Mark is backing him on everything. Any pushback is framed as not being a team player. Sanai, this feels calculated. Like Mark wanted you out specifically to put his own guy in place. The pieces started to click together. The vague reason for my dismissal, the speed at which I was replaced, the choice of my successor, it all pointed to something more sinister than a simple restructuring. This wasn't about the company's vision, it was about Mark's agenda. Ben, can you do me a favor? I asked, an idea starting to form in the back of my mind. I need you to keep your ears open. I want to know everything. Any strange emails, any closed-door meetings, anything that seems out of the ordinary. You got it, he said without hesitation. Mark has underestimated the loyalty you built with your team. He thinks we're all just cogs in his machine, but we're not. We'll be your eyes and ears. After the call, the fog of depression began to lift, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about losing my job anymore. It was about my professional integrity. Mark hadn't just fired me, he had tried to erase my legacy and replace it with a narrative that painted me as incompetent. He thought I would just fade away quietly with my severance check. He was wrong. He had started a war, and I had no intention of losing. For the next 2 weeks, my apartment transformed into a command center. While I dutifully applied for jobs during the day to keep up appearances, my nights were spent piecing together the puzzle of my termination. Ben became my inside source, feeding me snippets of information through encrypted messages. The first major clue came from a seemingly innocent company-wide announcement. Mark's department had just secured a massive new client, a lucrative contract that would be the company's flagship project for the next year. The announcement praised Mark's visionary leadership and negotiation skills in landing the deal. Ben sent me a message late that night. The new client, it's a company called Innovatech Solutions. The name didn't ring a bell. I spent hours digging into Innovatech, scouring their website, press releases, and executive profiles. They were a big player in the industry, and landing them was indeed a huge win. But as I dug deeper, I found something interesting. Their chief operating officer, a man named Alan Croft, had a familiar face. I searched his name on LinkedIn, and my blood ran cold. His previous job? He had been a senior director at the same company as Mark, over a decade ago. They weren't just former colleagues, they were connected. I messaged Ben. Check the project proposal for Innovatech. I need to know when the initial contact was made. It took him a day to get back to me. The information was buried in the company's server, but Ben was a wizard with code. Got it, his message read. The first proposal was sent 3 months ago. The project lead on the initial draft? It wasn't Mark. It was you. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I remembered it now. It was a speculative proposal, a long shot I had put together in my spare time. I had identified Innovatech as a potential dream client and drafted a comprehensive strategy to win them over. I had presented it to Mark, who had been dismissive at the time. Don't waste your energy, Sanai, he had said. They're out of our league. He had shut it down. Or so I thought. He had lied. He saw the potential in my proposal, but he didn't want me to get the credit for it. He needed to be the hero who landed the giant client. But my presence was a threat. If the deal went through, everyone would know it was my strategy, my work. I was the one with the expertise to lead the project. As long as I was there, I would have been the natural choice to manage the Innovatech account, a high-profile role that would have given me massive visibility with the executive team. He couldn't have that. He needed me out of the picture. The pieces all fit together. He had waited, biding his time. He let me do the groundwork, then he pushed me out just before the deal was finalized, installing his loyal puppet Liam to ensure he had full control. He stole my idea, my project, and my job. The anger I felt was so intense it was clarifying. This was no longer just about injustice, it was about fraud. He had deceived the company and built his success on my stolen labor. That night, I received another message from Ben. There's something else. Mark is submitting the Innovatech project for the annual Innovator of the Year award. The submission is full of your work, your slides, your data. He's literally rebranding it all as his own. That was the final straw. He wasn't just content with firing me and taking the credit internally. He wanted to parade my work around the entire industry and claim it as his masterpiece. I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. The job hunt was no longer my priority. I wasn't just looking for a new role anymore. I was looking for a way to get justice. Mark Foster thought he had buried me, but he had only planted a seed. And he had no idea what was about to grow. Armed with the truth, my despair morphed into a laser-focused determination. My first instinct was to expose Mark. I could go to his superiors, to the CEO, with the evidence I had gathered. But I quickly realized that would be a messy, uncertain battle. It would be my word, the word of a disgruntled ex-employee, against a star department head who had just landed the company's biggest client. They would protect him, their asset. I would be dismissed as bitter and vindictive. No, a direct confrontation wasn't the answer. I needed a different kind of leverage. I needed to fight this battle on my own terms, not within the walls of a company that had already cast me aside. My job search took on a new, strategic purpose. I stopped applying for project manager roles and started aiming higher. I targeted director-level positions at rival companies that competed directly with my old firm. I knew my resume was strong, but I needed to be exceptional. I spent days refining my portfolio, highlighting the quantifiable successes of the projects I had led. I used the my Innovatech proposal, as a case study, a prime example of my strategic capabilities. It was my work, after all. I wasn't going to let Mark be the only one to benefit from it. One evening, I came across a job posting that made my heart skip a beat. It was for a director of digital strategy at a smaller, more agile tech company called NextGen Dynamics. They were known for their innovative work and had a reputation for being a great place to work. They were a direct competitor to my old company, often vying for the same clients. It was a long shot. The position was a significant step up from my previous role. But I was done playing small. I customized my cover letter, weaving in my knowledge of the competitive landscape. I submitted my application at 2 a.m., fueled by coffee and a burning desire for redemption. To my surprise, I got a call the next day. The interview process was grueling, 4 rounds, including a presentation to the executive team. In the final round, I was interviewed by the CEO, a man named David Chen. He was in his late 50s, with a warm demeanor that belied a sharp, analytical mind. He looked at my resume, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You led the Atlas project at your last company, I see. Very impressive results. We were competing for that client, you know. Your team beat us to it." "Thank you," I said, my confidence swelling. "I'm very proud of what my team accomplished." Then he looked at my case study, the Innovatech strategy. "This is a bold proposal," he said, tapping a finger on the document. "Innovatech is a notoriously difficult client to crack. What makes you think this would work?" This was my moment. For the next 20 minutes, I walked him through my strategy with a passion and confidence that I hadn't felt in months. I explained the market analysis, the user data, the creative hooks, the technical implementation plan. I knew the strategy inside and out because it was mine. David listened intently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, "we've been trying to land a meeting with Innovatech for over a year with no luck. Your old company just signed a massive contract with them. That was your proposal, wasn't it?" I met his gaze and, for the first time, I told the truth to someone outside of my inner circle. I developed the entire strategy, I said, my voice steady. My role was made redundant 2 weeks before the deal was announced. David's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He knew how the corporate world worked. He had seen this kind of story before. He stood up and extended his hand. Thank you for your time, Sanai. We'll be in touch. I walked out of that interview feeling a sense of liberation. I had no idea if I would get the job, but it didn't matter. I had stood on my own 2 feet and proudly claimed my work. I had taken back my narrative. 2 days later, David Chin called me himself. Sanai, he said, and I could hear a smile in his voice. Welcome to Next Gen Dynamics. When can you start? Starting at Next Gen Dynamics was like stepping into a different universe. The culture was collaborative, transparent, and innovative, everything my old company pretended to be. My new title, Director of Digital Strategy, came with a level of autonomy and responsibility I had only dreamed of. David Chen became a true mentor, trusting my vision and giving me the resources I needed to succeed. I didn't waste a moment. I poured all my energy, all my frustrated ambition, into my new role. I assembled a brilliant team, a mix of seasoned experts and hungry young talent. We worked hard, but we also worked smart. We launched 3 majorly successful campaigns in my first 6 months, stealing market share from our competitors, including, to my immense satisfaction, my old company. I kept in touch with Ben, who was growing increasingly miserable under Mark's and Liam's chaotic leadership. As I had predicted, Liam was completely out of his depth. The Innovatech project, which should have been a crowning achievement, was a mess. Deadlines were being missed, the client was unhappy, and the team was on the verge of mutiny. Mark, instead of managing the situation, was deflecting blame and putting immense pressure on the team. He's a tyrant, Ben told me over a coffee one weekend. He micromanages everything, but he doesn't understand the technical details, so his decisions are making things worse. He's running the department into the ground. People are starting to leave. Meanwhile, NextGen was thriving. Our success was making waves in the industry. We were the underdog, the nimble innovator that was outmaneuvering the slow, bloated giants. Our revenue doubled in my first year. David was thrilled and gave me even more responsibility, expanding my department and putting me in charge of all new client acquisitions. One of my key strategies was to go after the clients my old company was fumbling. With Ben's discreet insights, I knew exactly which accounts were unhappy. I knew their pain points, and I knew how to solve them. One by one, we started poaching their clients, offering them the efficiency, innovation, and dedicated support they were no longer getting. Each client we won was a small victory, another nail in the coffin of Mark's reputation. I never mentioned his name, never spoke ill of my former employer. I didn't have to. My success was my revenge. I was proving, in the most public way possible, that he had made a colossal mistake. He hadn't cut a redundant employee, he had cut the very person who could have led his department to greatness and handed her to his biggest competitor. 18 months after I started at NextGen, we hit a major milestone. We surpassed my old company in market valuation. We were officially the bigger, more successful player. That same week, David called me into his office. Sanai, he said, a broad smile on his face. The board is creating a new C-suite position. Vice President of Growth and Strategy. They want you to have it. I was stunned. VP. It was a level I hadn't expected to reach for at least another decade. The promotion comes with something else, he added, his eyes twinkling. We're expanding. We just acquired a smaller tech firm that was struggling financially. We're going to absorb their talent and their client list. The deal closes next week. That's amazing news, I said, my mind racing with the possibilities. Which firm? David slid a folder across his desk. The company's logo was printed on the front. It was my old company. They had been so mismanaged under Mark's leadership, losing clients and talent, that their stock had plummeted, making them a prime target for a takeover. NextGen Dynamics, my new home, had just bought the company that had thrown me out like garbage. And with my new promotion, I was about to become their boss. The week leading up to the official merger announcement was the most surreal of my life. I was part of the transition team, which meant I had access to all of my old company's internal documents, personnel files, performance reviews, project reports. It was a treasure trove of information that confirmed everything I had suspected. I saw the trail of Mark's mismanagement laid bare in the numbers. Plummeting team morale, high employee turnover, and a string of failed projects. The Innovatech account, his supposed masterpiece, was a disaster zone, hemorrhaging money and on the verge of being lost entirely. I also saw his personnel file. Tucked inside were several confidential complaints filed against him by former employees for bullying and creating a toxic work environment, all of which had been quietly dismissed by HR. The day of the announcement, I walked into my old office building not as a visitor, but as a member of the new leadership team. The familiar scent of stale coffee and corporate anxiety hit me, but this time, it held no power over me. I was different. I was stronger. David and I led an all-hands meeting in the same large conference room where I had once given presentations to Mark. I stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of familiar faces. I saw my old team, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and hope. And then I saw him. Mark Foster. He was sitting in the third row, looking smug and unconcerned, probably assuming he could schmooze his way into the new corporate structure. He hadn't recognized my name on the merger announcement, or perhaps he simply didn't care to remember the project manager he had cast aside 2 years ago. David spoke first, outlining the vision for the newly merged company. Then he turned the microphone over to me. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sanai, and I am the new Vice President of Growth and Strategy for the combined company. Some of you, however, might remember me." I let my eyes drift over the crowd and landed them squarely on Mark. I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, followed by a wave of disbelief. The color drained from his face. His smug smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. The confident, powerful man who had fired me without a second thought now looked small and scared. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the room like wildfire. I saw Ben grinning from ear to ear. "As of today, this department will be undergoing a significant restructuring," I continued, my gaze still locked on Mark. "My top priority is to restore a culture of innovation, collaboration, and respect. We will be re-evaluating all projects and leadership roles to ensure we have the right people in the right positions to move forward successfully." It was a professional, corporate speech, but the subtext was crystal clear. The reign of terror was over. The man who had unfairly fired me was now my subordinate. The power dynamic had been flipped so completely it was almost poetic. I wasn't just back in the game, I owned the entire stadium. After the meeting, I sent out a series of calendar invites for one-on-one meetings with all the department heads. Mark's was scheduled for the end of the day. For the rest of the afternoon, I met with my old colleagues, reassuring them of their value and laying out my vision for the future. The sense of relief and optimism in the office was palpable. Finally, at 5 p.m., there was a hesitant knock on my new office door, Mark's old office. "Come in," I said. Mark Foster walked in, a shadow of the man he once was. His expensive suit seemed to hang off him, and his usual confident swagger was gone. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. He sat down in the same chair where I had sat when he fired me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to offer some pathetic, self-serving excuse. But I held up a hand, silencing him. "Before you say anything," I said, my voice calm and cold as ice. "Let's talk about the Innovatech project." Mark flinched as if I had slapped him. He sat there, trapped in the silence of his former office, as I laid out the facts. I have the original project proposal, I began, my voice measured and devoid of emotion. The one I created, with a timestamp from 3 months before you fired me. I also have the server logs showing you accessed and downloaded my files the day after I was terminated. And, of course, I have your submission for the Innovator of the Year award, which plagiarized my work, slide for slide. His face, which had been pale, was now a sickly shade of gray. He stared at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. You didn't just fire me, Mark, I continued. You committed fraud. You stole my intellectual property and passed it off as your own to advance your career. You built your success on a lie, and in doing so, you nearly ran this department and this entire company into the ground. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense level. The Innovatech account is a disaster. The client is ready to walk. Your team is broken. Your leadership has been a catastrophic failure. And now, you work for me. He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. Sanai. I can explain. It was a misunderstanding. The pressure from the executives. Save it, I cut him off sharply. There is no explanation for what you did. There is only a choice. Your choice. I slid 2 folders across the desk, just as Jessica Chin had done to me 2 years ago. Option 1, I said, tapping the first folder. Is your resignation. You will sign this letter, effective immediately. You will receive no severance, but we will not pursue legal action for the intellectual property theft. You can walk out of here and disappear quietly. I paused, letting the weight of the offer hang in the air. Then I tapped the second folder. Option 2, I said, my voice hardening. You refuse to resign. In which case, I will terminate your employment for cause. I will then hand over this entire file of evidence to our legal department, who will be more than happy to make an example of you. We will sue you for damages, and I will personally ensure that every single person in this industry knows exactly what you did. You will never work in this town again. He stared at the folders, his breathing shallow. The arrogant, powerful man was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. He had spent his career bullying and intimidating others, and now he was facing a consequence he couldn't talk his way out of. He reached a trembling hand and pulled the first folder, the resignation, towards him. He didn't say a word. He simply opened it, took out a pen, and signed his name. When he was done, he pushed it back across the desk. He stood up, avoiding my gaze, and walked towards the door. But before he left, I had one last thing to say. Mark, I said. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, his back still to me. For what it's worth, I said, your skill set, while valuable, no longer aligns with our long-term vision. The decision is final. I watched as he walked out of my office, a defeated man stripped of his power and his pride. I didn't feel a surge of triumph or joy. I just felt a quiet, profound sense of justice. It was over. The next morning, I called Ben into my office. I need a new head of department, I said, a smile finally breaking across my face. Someone with integrity, vision, and the respect of their team. Are you interested? Ben's eyes widened, and then a huge grin spread across his face. Absolutely, he said. As I looked out the window of my new office, at the city skyline stretching out before me, I knew this wasn't just a new beginning. It was a victory. I had faced betrayal and injustice, and I had not only survived, but I had thrived. I had rebuilt my career on my own terms, and in the end, I had reclaimed everything that had been stolen from me, and more. The world of work could be brutal, but I had proven that with resilience, integrity, and a little bit of strategic revenge, the right person could always come out on top.